last week we talked about, or I talked about, because it's mostly me here, the excellence of the involuntary, which we might be experiencing right now. And I actually just want to say too, like I didn't quite realize, like I realized it sort of halfway through. I didn't really prep for the talk last week. I sort of did a little bit more this week, but it was more of a brain dump. But primarily what happened last week is what I kind of realized is if there is more of an outline, then I can kind of just fill in the blanks as I go. And I realized I was actually, what felt like was happening was happening in what I was reading. It was more like the involuntary and flow, and things would kind of just come up. So I thought I would tell you guys that because I thought it was kind of cool to see, like, you know, there wasn't a lot of prep other than, life and arrows. But being able to like let that stuff out and express. And so that will hopefully continue throughout the rest of the talks. So today is real power. The sutra is real power is in meeting life in pitch perfect response. So I'll read that. Yeah. All right. Real power is the power to meet or become anything in pitch perfect response. Responding in this way brings us into our true nature, an ever dynamic identity that can afford to meet life on life's terms. It is the power to meet the conditions of our lives without attachments to ideas of self, without holding on to past identities, without invoking shame or guilt to punish ourselves because we are operating according to rules that may violate the appropriateness of society. By releasing ego/cultural programming, we make room for our true nature to shine forth and begin to change the limited trajectory we think of as ourselves. We become aligned with the potency of soul and its boundless unfolding. We judge and dismiss power easily because we do not notice when we're looking right at it. As long as we are not using it to get something for ourselves, the greatest power we can have is to become a clear mirror to reflect power in any way that is called for and is most useful. To live in the dynamic and malleable identity that is capable of presenting however it's perceived without impediment, exactly in the way it is wanted and desired. This is power moving in the direction of evolution. Intentional conformity to what our environment is asking is not a signifier of interior weakness, but of interior weakness, but of interior wealth. It may look like weakness, but conformity, when executed consciously, represents massive power. This power, greater than any one individual, calls each of our deeper selves forth through one another, asking us to evolve by inspiring and becoming what each of us is seeking. We can take that down. Okay, so I chose that one. I remember reading one version of it and reading this version of it. It's like there's only like a sentence or two from when they first kind of came out. It's a little bit different, and I just kind of remember like, I don't like this. I'm not really into this. Mostly because of kind of liking my personality, whether it serves me or whether, other people like it. I enjoy my personality. I think most of us do. And we have a tendency to hold pretty tight to it, even when it doesn't serve us. So I found myself a little bit irritated. But going deeper into it, there felt like a freedom and a liberation. And so I'll kind of get into that a little bit. But what I'm going to do now is read a few paragraphs from the Black Book, which is sort of in progress right now. There is a sickness in Black American culture and politics. It's the persistent myth that they can or will ever give us power. We already have the power in us. It's compacted and compressed under centuries of trauma, concentrated. Power is the willingness to fully own your Blackness, the good, the bad, and especially the ugly. What we fear in ourselves is where our power comes from. What we fear in ourselves is where our power comes from. Blackness lies on the edges of the dominant culture, never truly a part of it. Trying to get into the dominant culture is a waste of our power. That's the struggle that is exhausting. Resilience is the result of being able to take that trauma and use it as the power it is, to keep going and flow. It's not really something you think about. It is us. We are resilient. We love to play, to provoke, to talk smack. We are brash. Either we stand up and don't duck our problems, or we bob and weave and duck them well. We code switch. We feel. We don't rely solely on the mind. Add all these things to resilience, and there's your plug into eudaimonia. This mix of traits feels attractive to the dominant culture, but it's also dangerous, disruptive. The dominant culture is mostly in their heads rational. There's no rhythm up there. Don't take that as a blanket statement. Just don't. In our misguided quest for acceptance and inclusion, we try to take the same rational paths as dominant culture. Then we feel like we're losing. We are losing. It's not our path because that's not who we are. Trying to do it any other way is met with skepticism, especially from other Black folks. Go along to get along. Okay, so that might actually seem contradictory to the Sutra, but it's not. And it's actually laid out in the Sutra why it's not. And that's because of 2 points. One is real power lies in a dynamic identity. And it's really the ability to be able to become anything in pitch perfect response. And that's the key. It's a pitch perfect response. Aligning with our true nature, that's like, it's constantly dynamic. Like your true nature, your actual nature is constantly dynamic if you're sort of meeting life on life's terms. And so this usually involves letting go of ideas of who you are, any kind of past static identities, shame or guilt, and for operating in ways that might be socially inappropriate. That seems to be like a huge one. And I think anyone sort of on the path of Eros has that some sort of shame or guilt, for operating in ways that might feel or are deemed socially inappropriate. By losing our own substance, though, we gain the only substance that actually gives us substance. And that's kind of how you jump into the infinite game, the infinite sort of possibility of life. So that's point one. And then point two, and so I don't have, point two feels most closely aligned with the individual and where they're at and what level of, I guess, consciousness they're at, or what level they can attain or have access to. And so that's through intentional conformity, and that's power through intentional conformity. And so that line that really struck out to me about judging and dismissing power because we don't recognize it when we see it, when it's like looking us right in the face, smack dab in the face. And it's an interesting point. I think that particular piece is most likely the biggest malady in of in and of Black culture today is like not really recognizing power when it's just looking us right in the face. You can go and look in the mirror, you know, and see it. And there's a spot where it's like the greatest power that we can have is to actually, and you have to roll with me on this one for a second, is to actually become what someone wants us to be, as long as we're not trying to get something from them or out of that particular pose. As long as it's not commerce-based, it's not transactional, if it is in resonance with what's happening in that moment. And it's not a mimic of it. So it's like you have enough room in yourself, or you've cleared out enough, we'll put it that way. You've cleared out enough of the substance that kind of like clogs up your ability to move, to be dynamic, to be malleable, to show up exactly how it is wanted and desired for you to show up. And so if that substance is, you know, sort of like the personality based things that make up your static or just to make up your personality, your identity, once those things are kind of out of the way, you're able to become more fluid and more dynamic. And in that, you can then reach you can get closer to being in resonance. You get closer to being in resonance, you can enter flow. You enter flow, you have access to eudaimonia, you have access to flourishing. And so, you know, there's an interesting spot where where there's a lot of points in that I've noticed in Black culture, or at least, you know, at least where I grew up, or at least who I heard talking, where it's like, you can't do that. Like, we do too much of this and that's why we're losing. Or like, you can't keep opening your heart to like white people. We're too open-hearted, we're too caring. And let's, you know, look at where that got us. Like, and these are actual things that I've heard. You know, whereas at the same time, it's like, no, that's actually our power. That's actually like, that's how the resilience is actually formed. And so it does, and it can look like a weakness. You know, because sometimes I even think about that about myself, you know, where there's spots that I don't want to keep my heart open, or I like, or I feel like, you know, I'm a sucker for continuing to do that. And it's like, no, that's actually where the power lies. And so it's not, well, I'll say the reason why I said like what I've read from the Black book seems like it is contradictory to the Sutra, but where it actually isn't is because 9 times out of 10, what's happening is that assimilation is actually to get something. It's not to meet life on life's terms. It's not to be in resonance. It's actually to get something external. And so often our greater selves aren't being called out. It's just like some weird dryness that like everybody's trying to pretend to be something else to kind of to fit in. And it just doesn't quite work. You become, you know, one person at work and then you're another person at home, you know, kind of like I said last week. And so tapping into the ability to do that though is a power. And so it's just doing it consciously, using the felt sense and the non-rational to know when it's called for, what is called for, and when something else is called for to kind of change. And so there's like an interesting spot where it's like losing our substance I think when I initially read the sutra, to me, if you say like the substance of something, it is what that thing is made of, right? And so I think initially I had a feeling of like, well, no, that's like my essence. Like I can't lose that. And it's like, no, that's not actually your essence. It is it's like the components of a static identity or personality. It's like that layer on top, right? And so then you're losing that stuff. You're losing that barrier. And the reason why I chose this particular sutra is because there's often interactions and there's often ways of seeing people and seeing how they operate and seeing that they actually have access to their essence in Black culture, and seeing that like then it's deemed inappropriate, or it's deemed like dangerous, or it's deemed ghetto. That's a big one. You know what ghetto is? Ghetto to in my opinion, ghetto is like when somebody says, "Oh, you're being ghetto." It's like, no, you're like being culturally inappropriate. It has nothing to do with like economic class or anything like that. It's actually it's I mean it's a bit of a slur. I don't actually want to use that word, but I can't quite think of another one right now. And so it's dismissive. How about that? No matter, on some level, like every word can be turned into sort of an exalted form. And I think in some levels it has, but ultimately I think that's where that came from. It's Black people calling each other ghetto, where it's like, well, I can't take you out. I can't take you out. I can't take you anywhere because you're going to act up. And it's like, well, this person might actually be acting from their essence and you're the fake one, but you're the one who can like actually be out in the world and be safe, right? So you've kind of covered up and sold your essence so that you can be safe. And so once I kind of made that connection that like, it's not the substance, it's actually, it's not the essence, it's the substance. Then you get to see that like below the substance is the reality of your true nature. It's below preferences of the ego. It's where real intimacy and connection is made. It's where Eros is ignited. And because Eros is an essence-based path, we're constantly being invited to like play at the depths of who we are. But you have to go below the surface to actually, below the ego to meet. And then I would say, in essence, truth is a priority. Form doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter. It's truth. This is where creation comes from. This is how you get into flow, when you tap into that essence. And this is how you stay in flow, when you stay with that essence. But on the top level, substance often takes priority over truth. So then it had me think about like the story of my friend, the dancer, right? So I primarily initially knew her, a super cool chick, from New Orleans, had like the accent and stuff, had the hair, or she didn't actually have the hair, she was bald. She named her daughter Ailey, since she had danced with like Alvin Ailey. And so I knew her as one person, and all the personality pieces out that she let me see, because we generally at that level only let people see so much of us. It was cool. We were cool. And then when she stepped out on that stage and started dancing, and it was in pitch perfect response to whatever it was that she was feeling, the music, whatever was trying to come through her. It was just mind blowing. And the ability to allow for that to happen is a gift that is, let's just say, heavy in Black culture. You allow like to have your soul moved, and then you allow to like have that be transmitted. And I think the same thing is like with athletes. So I'm kind of going through and I'm saying, you know, like we have artists, we have musicians, we have athletes. You know, obviously they're way more to Black culture, but if you look at these things that have touched, that have influenced and touched dominant culture so greatly, these are the things that are coming through. And so I'm mainly using those as examples for that reason. And so when you see these professional athletes, or not even professional athletes, but when you see somebody who's really good at what they do, you actually are getting to see like the gifts of the body being allowed to come through without the impediments of substance to block what needs to come forward in pitch perfect response. There's no grip to what you want. There's no grip to what you prefer. You're not grabbing for things that you think you need, which you often don't anyway. You're only feeling, you're not thinking, you're only feeling what's being asked for moment to moment. And I think that's the key to resilience. And I think resilience is a key to resonance. So one of the gifts of Blackness, we'll say, and the Black experience, and especially the Black experience in the United States, is resilience. There's just so many gifts that have come from it, whether it's, you know, being able to hear the music that's come from it, the ability to convert like no other, to alchemize, to be able to laugh at things that you really shouldn't be, you know, it really feels like you shouldn't be laughing at. Those types of things come from resilience. And to me, it's simply like being able to adjust the rational mind to enter into an irrational response. You have a power to respond. You have to have the power to respond. If you don't have a power to respond, you're not responding, but that's still a response. But it's not without having the resilience to continue to take in and then learn to convert in some way and then bring back out, you won't really know how to respond in resonance. And so you kind of need a resilience to actually hone that muscle. And I think Black people have been given plenty of practice at that. So to me, it's kind of like it's a code switching of a different sort. It's like value neutral. It's not safety or assimilation based. You're actually able to offer something real rather than trying to take something, you know, under the radar. You're actually offering your real, true nature. This is art. This is how we make art. This is how we receive art. This is how art is transmitted. This is the abundance of creativity. I remember this one time where I really kind of understood, and this was only maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, where I really understood what music was. And I was driving along, and we were actually driving to a demonstration. I'll just say a demonstration. And I was in the car, and I think there had been talk about like basically like, what is a demo? You know, you kind of, a woman is transmitting how the strokes are feeling in here. You kind of get that, you get that transmission of it, the sensation and the feelings of it out in the room. And I was like, holy shit, wait a minute. That's all music is. Music, especially when it's done well, especially when it's timeless, especially when it's right, you know, when it's like right of the moment, it is a translation of somebody's soul into sound. And that sound is transmitted to you so that you hopefully on some level feel what they were feeling or what they wanted you to feel through what they expressed. And that felt pretty profound to me. It's just like to really be able to do that well, you have to lose the substance of whatever is on top to be able to like pour that transmission out so that people can actually really feel what's going on in there. You know, like like if we think about like the blues, you know, I don't think anybody feels happy when they're listening to the blues. They're called the blues for a reason. But when they're done really well, you feel what they're feeling. And generally, you're brought back probably to a feeling like, no, I don't think anybody listens to the blues when they're happy either. But you're brought back to a feeling that was similar to that. And then there's a sort of a resonance. There's a resonance that's brought together in taking in and receiving what has been expressed. I was like, oh, that's kind of awesome. And so to be able to access those states, you kind of get in flow with one another. You get in flow with the music, and again, you're able to better access flourishing or eudaimonia. Another way that I kind of thought about it was when you, I mean, I don't know that very many people on the call are sports fans. I know there's like one or two at least. But if you think of any kind of moment where you see someone who feels like they're doing these sort of, oh my God, kind of things with their body, like, you know, the highlight reels or even, you know, like when the Olympics come on and you see these people, they've trained so long and so hard and they do things with a sort of perfection that you're like, oh my God, like you can actually, you can feel it. You can feel all the work that they put into it. You can feel everyone watching what they're doing. You can feel the precision of what's happening. The ones that really stick with us is because like somebody is in the moment. There's nothing else going on for them. Their body is in pitch perfect response to what is being asked of them, of what they're supposed to do. And I think it stays with us as being sort of a superhuman occurrence because there's an actual transcendence that's happening. And, you know, for however superficial it may seem, being sports, the fact that that happens so often, I think is because of being of sort of Black cultural ability, you know, and obviously it doesn't happen only in Black culture. I'm just saying like as a stereotypical thing, I'll put it that way. It is because that substance, like you're just embodied. You're embodied, you're non-rational and voluntary, letting things flow through, letting things be expressed, not rational, not thinking. In the moment, you have reached presence. But here's a funny one that kind of, and I don't mean funny, haha. I mean like it was a very interesting one that kind of occurred to me. Is that this actually also happens in, so there's two Black female archetypes that came up for me when I was reading this. And so one is the Mammy and the other is the Jezebel. And so the Mammy, we'll just say, is like, she tends to be a nanny kind of person. She's kind of like the mother, the mom archetype. There's a tendency for her to not be particularly sexual. She's Aunt Jemima from the syrup bottle or the pancake box. She's usually a heavier set woman. Trying to think if there's anything else. You wouldn't assume that she had a sex life. And then you have the Jezebel, who is, we'll just say she's a hoe, but she's like the gold digging hoe. She comes in various sizes and shapes, and we all know what she feels like. But sort of in their purest form, it's like where the Mammy may have started out needing to provide for her family, like having some kind of exchange, some kind of commerce-based relationship. She might have had to provide for her family by taking care of somebody else's family, which is usually how it occurred. So she would wind up taking care of somebody else's kids and then have to have the rest of her family take care of her kids. But what you found, and I think this is actually still happening today, but less so with Black or African-American women, more with like Hispanic nannies, where it's like, you may start out doing this for money, but what winds up happening is you genuinely start to care for the child. Sometimes the family, but most often the child, and the child starts to like care for you, and it becomes a situation where it is like that woman is basically that child's mom. And that child is loved no matter how society looks at that woman when it gets to that point. So there are a lot of I can tell you for sure, there are a lot of Southern white, like rich or wealthy white people who were raised by Black women for this exact, situation. And often, depending, that woman, she may not have been looked upon kindly by the family or her, or the community or her community. But often there was a bond that was formed between her and that child. And so that's where it goes from the sort of commerce-based mimic of what's being asked of you to, let's just say, a value neutral sort of code switch of genuinely providing what is asked of you without having to, without looking for something, without it being commerce-based, without it being transactional. And then the Jezebel, good friend of Jezebel. So you got the mama and you got the whore, basically. And for the Jezebel, she provides a certain alchemization that often would start with like wanting to line her pockets, sometimes exact revenge against men, likely both Black and white men. And sometimes that would roll into being able to really genuinely see what she was providing for these men. A sort of care, being able to both care about each other if they were open to the situation, like if they were actually opening to the depth of what was actually happening and allow it to come out. There was a recognition of, oh no, maybe this is my mistress, but you're not gonna and I can't talk about her. I can't, show her to my friends, but she's taken care of because she provides something for me that isn't commerce based. And when I say provide, I don't mean commerce based. I just mean like there is what's actually needed is called forth and allowed to come through. And it's a very interesting spot because if I look at, I think these are the two there's two other archetypes, and I don't actually remember what they are, but these two are probably like the loudest ones when people think of Black women. And they don't necessarily look or feel or are called these two names anymore, but it is very much just a kind of a cultural stereotype. Like, even if you look at like Oprah, she still on some level falls into a Mammy archetype. In fact, the woman that she played in The Color Purple was essentially a Mammy until she got fed up and I think started knocking people out. And that'll happen from time to time too. Or you see like, if I think of a Jezebel right now, like honestly, the first name that comes to mind is like Megan Thee Stallion. It's like the expression of sex for sex sake or for a woman's sake or a woman's power's sake. But behind it is often, let me get this change, let me get this money. Dudes are for like, I'm only here because I want the bag. I'm not like, I'm not trying to get in a relationship or whatever. Versus the actual power that's there in both of those, in both of those roles, but in that role in particular. And I think that is actually, that's always kind of what's wanted when those are reached for, when they become popularized. It is the underneath thing, the essence that everybody's kind of looking for. But everybody's being sold the substance because it's easier to sell. Nobody has to get confronted by the substance, even though they do. But as long as there's a commercial interaction, then you don't really have to worry about it. And so again, like I kind of put together, like I brought this particular sutra up because I think it goes back again to there's real and true power. Everybody feels it, whether they say it or not, whether they agree with it or not, everybody feels it. But it is dismissed, and first and foremost by Black culture, because it doesn't fit into the commercialization or the commerce-based realm. It doesn't. It's like feeling the essence of everything, feeling the essence and the power that's underneath. Knowing that like that's there, feeling it, feeling the potential of it, feeling the heartbreak in that like the potential isn't expressed or expanded, or that the potential isn't reached. But continuing to kind of sell the substance instead of bringing out the essence, or bringing out the essence only after the substance has been paid for. And so I will say with that, like that's a lot of musicians and that's a lot of athletes. Like that's partially the only way that those things will ever come out is if they were being paid for. Like I could be the best football player on the block, but I'm probably likely going to go and find something else to do that's going to pay me if I'm not getting paid for, to play ball. And I think that happens a lot too. But we still get to tap into that essence. And that essence still gets reached for and is desired. And I think the biggest gift that we could kind of give ourselves as individuals, as a culture, and honestly, it doesn't matter what race you are, is to really start to learn and understand, like, what's the stuff on top? What is the substance? How do I get that off? Obviously, there's practices for that. How do I get that off? And then be able to express the essence, allow the essence to come forth, and then develop the resilience to continue to do that, to continue to do that, to continue to do that on your own. And so I think that's another thing too, where it's like, if we say that there is a gift of oppression, it is that there was no choice. And what I mean, like, no choice is like, there's always a choice, but it's almost like, it's like a choiceless choice. It's like you either die or you learn how to live. And then if you're going to learn how to live, you may as well figure out how to make it fun, or like figure out how to make it feel good. Figure out how to laugh when you should be crying. That would be the gift of oppression. It's like the ability to have that resilience and to kind of keep coming back and staying here. We could have maybe gone to Liberia. I don't know. We could have gone back to Africa if we wanted to, if that was a thing. But I say the majority of us did not. So, so then, the choice, not choice, was that we got this resilience in return. And in that resilience, we got to learn how to respond in pitch perfect resonance through creation, through doing things with our bodies that just other cultures have a really hard time with, like dancing. And to be able to do that, we just don't see it. I just really don't think we see it. A lot of people don't see it. Like I can say to my family all these things and they'll be like, yeah, I totally agree. And you can feel it in the back of your mind, like you can feel it in your being, but life isn't led with that. A lot of life for a lot of people is led by the substance. And the substance often has a lot of victimhood attached to it. It has a lot of preference attached to it. It has a lot of, I don't want to be discomfort. I don't want to be uncomfortable anymore. I want to only do what's comfortable, and then not understanding why there's depression, why there's so much sugar that's being eaten, why there's diabetes, why there's high blood pressure, why your life just feels dull, no matter what you put into it. Why there's a general sort of feeling of, why am I losing? Why does it feel like we're losing? Why don't I feel like I have enough? Like, why do I hate going to work? There's plenty of that, and there's plenty hearing about it. But there's not enough remembering of what the real power is. And it is ability that we have to tap into presence, to tap into flow, to tap into the body, to tap into the non-rational, and meet life in pitch perfect response. So, you wait till the end of the week and maybe you go out or you go home to your lady, or you wait for the football game to come on so that maybe you can kind of like touch it when it's readily available, which is the interesting part. It's readily available. So that's what I got for this week. As I did last week, if you guys want to share anything that kind of stood out, anything that like hopefully this made sense, anything that maybe didn't make sense, any kind of reflections or shared, I'd love to hear them.
I'll share. I really just love like how you verbalize things that me as a white person I have felt and intuited for a while about Black people, just really like their extreme level of power. And it feels like the feminine too, you know, it's like the depth of the feminine and the depth of power and like the depth of feeling, where like I could be more head oriented but like I can do things really fast in my head, but lack that like, but I'm learning how to really ground into my body. And I remember, you know, you're talking about the like Mammy archetype, and there was this woman at my elementary school who was like, would just be there at daycare, and she was like this mountain presence, you know, this Black woman. And I was like, I had no idea how to relate to her, but she's like in my consciousness really deeply. And she seemed like pretty grumpy all the time and like kind of scared me, but like also like a ton of power. Like I would never do anything to like upset her. So she was probably really good at her job, you know, and but I never had a template for like interacting with that level of power. And yeah, and one more thing I'll say is like, I don't know if I've said this before, but I had like a hard time kind of fitting in. Like my friends, there was 2 lunch groups, like 2 lunch sessions in high school. And so you'd always get like split off with your friends and hope you have the same lunch, but then I didn't. So it's like my 2 friends that I had. And there was this table of like Black girls, like the Black girl table. It was like long, you know, and I didn't quite fit in with them, but they like let me in and let me sit with them and have a place. And I thought that was really generous. And I was like, wow, like there's like an understanding that I think they have around like being an outsider, or just like or maybe just the feminine need for connection, you know, and how vulnerable that is. And that also stuck with me. So thank you for breaking it down. Oh, thanks for breaking it down a bit more. Yeah.
Thanks, Leah. I really appreciate you sharing that bit. Yeah, that's the spot. Like, I think I was joking with somebody about like their hood pass and like losing their hood pass, but I was Kevin. But what a hood pass actually is you're just being accepted. Like you just been given carte blanche to be accepted by most Black people, is pretty much what that is. And you know, but there's that piece where funnily enough, I heard this the most after the whole Justin Timberlake Janet Jackson thing, where people were like, revoke his hood pass. Where it's like, we love you especially if you love us. But then, you know, people start to see it as a weakness when it feels like there's a sense of, oh, well, maybe they don't love us so much. We gotta stop doing that. But it's just, I mean, you just kind of can't help it. It's just like, that's just, to me, you know, the way I grew up, that's just the culture. Like if you see somebody sitting by themselves and you have 4 of your girls over there, invite them over. Yeah.
I love that. It's not taken for granted over here. So
Sweet.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll go with Patricia next.
Hi, Courtney.
Hello.
Hi, it's good to see you and hear you. Wonderful. And what I really appreciate so much, one of the things that struck me during this last time together is that I've never spent 45 minutes listening to a Black person talk about the experience. And so thank you so much for up about it. It's like, I don't know, it never occurred to me or something. So thank you for offering this. I really appreciate it. And one of the things that sort of connected in your speaking was about resilience and flow. And I had read recently that flow is something that you can't do without a skill because you've gotten the skill, so then it flows. And the resilience that has occurred to me as a flow now because it's a skill and it's been required and acquired. So thank you.
Thank you for that too. I'm gonna try to write that down. I love that piece. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next up, we'll go with Joe.
Hey, Courtney.
Hey, Joe.
When you were when you were sharing and I loved how you articulated everything so well. Thank you so much. And I could like follow along. And I thought about when I was a kid, right? And I was born into this dominant culture. And then my parents, they were uncomfortable around Black people. They were uncomfortable around this non-dominant culture. And I picked up on that. And two things happened. One, in order to stay in my culture, stay in that dominant culture, I had to kind of adopt that. Like there's this risk if I become authentic, some of that authenticity may be contrary to that dominant culture. And being in a dominant culture, it's scary to think about not being part of it. And that's like my journey, I feel over here is like accepting that is not me, that all that stuff that's that dominant culture is not me, it's not my essence. And so I can let it go. And then I also noticed, how we dealt with this uncomfortableness with the Black culture was, what I picked up on is, we assimilate it, we make it we make it part of us. Okay, like, yeah, we have Black friends, and then we'd find how they're similar to us, and find out how they're like the same, and then we'd relate with them then. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we were like denying this subculture, like forcing it to be like us in order to relate with it and with them. And it's just yeah, so I never learned how to really like acknowledge the difference in the cultures, and embrace it and meet those cultures there. And I can sense that, that's where some of my discomfort and awkwardness comes from. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for that. One, I'm really glad that you were able to follow along because I was having a hard time following along. But two, I think also part of that is to remember that, all of these experiences are co-created, so just kind of put that little feather in your hat for thought, for food for thought. Yeah.
Yeah, real good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're muted, Shannon. Do you want me to go, love?
Yes, Lisa.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay, yes, I'll go quick. Courtney, well, one silly thing is like, I love how last week's call, like the sun started to come in on your face at this time. And it just happened again. And I was like, oh, like I'm really enjoying watching the sun come up, well, come on your face when, however, it's like the sun is shifting, whatever I'm gonna say. But the thing that you said that like had me really look at myself was like conforming. Because are you conforming because you're internally wealthy and can afford to, or are you conforming because you're trying to get something? So like that is like really like tinkering around in my soul this whole call. So I really appreciate that nugget and the series as a whole. Thank you.
I just yelled yes internally, just so you know that happened. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming to my house and being with me. And I don't know if Shannon needs to say anything here or not, but I
Thank-
appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Come back next week, same time, same place.